Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another YI, and today we're going to be talking about Total War Warhammer and the series, the trio of games, and just overall why I like them. I'll go ahead and say this now. I'm not the most in-depth fan of the original Old World setting. I'm familiar with it, growing up and being sort of around the models for several years and sort of buying the odd one or two. So I had a kind of general knowledge of pretty much all the factions. Used to collect White Dwarf back in the 90s when I was growing up and stuff like that. So when the original game was announced, it was pretty cool, the idea of being able to marry the kind of gameplay of Total War and the Warhammer setting was kind of perfect. And I think it was probably the sort of wish list for a lot of people for a long time. And here we are, 3 games in, multiple DLCs, and me now talking about it as a series that if it's one that you've never really dipped your toe into, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, I think at this stage, if you were to want to get into the Total War series, you will probably have to really value how much you're willing to spend, because one of the biggest drawbacks at this point in time is there are 3 separate games you can buy, and logically, there's no reason not to look at the most recent one and decide to jump straight into that. But the problem is you have a very narrow field of what it is you can choose to play. You've only got a limited number of factions. You don't have all of the factions available to you, which means you have to pay and buy the previous games in the series. You don't have to install them or anything, you just have to own them. And you might look at that Steam page and see all the DLCs, and it's a lot. I mean, there's a big monetary investment. You know, it's one of those things where if you were there from the start and you bought it all as you went along, as each new game came out, they became backwards compatible with the stuff you owned and they got added to it. So, from my perspective at the moment, I could stamp right now and say, yeah, brilliant, pick it up. It's really good, but if you've never played it before, yeah, there's a big issue with regards to how much you want to spend and where you want to start. And there's been a bit of controversy recently about the cost of DLCs, especially for the third game with the most recent DLC, the Shadows of Change one, that definitely did ruffle feathers. A lot of people were pretty upset with how that came across. But that aside, why I like the series? Well, the first reason I really like the series is that it's got a huge amount of variation to it. There's so much choice. If coming at it from the perspective I currently have all the content available to us, all the races, all the faction DLCs and stuff like that, and there's just so much variation. There's so much choice and different play styles there, you know, and compared to normal Total War series, which obviously feature a more historical setting, so you're always just going to get different flavours of, bloke with a sword and a shield if it's the medieval one, or bloke with a spear and a shield if it's Rome, that kind of thing. You're in a kind of similar sort of setup for all of them. There isn't a huge amount of variation in the way that the different factions fight each other, or how they deploy different weaponry. Like playing the Rome series, the Romans versus the Greeks, visually they look different, they have different name units, but ultimately they come down to a largely similar kind of style. You know, they don't have any kind of unique units, whereas in Warhammer, you've got the Empire of Man, who sure, they're walking around with halberds and crossbows and pistols and steam tanks and stuff like that, and then you've got something like Chaos, which are bringing demons to the field. You've got massive creatures, you've got monstrous entities, you've got like weird spellcasters and all kinds of stuff. So you get this clash of these different kinds of battles going on. Playing ogres, for instance, where your armies are just these vast, huge, bulky, girthy creatures that charge across the field wielding two-handed weapons, and like a single unit of ogres is like 16 ogres, depending on the settings of your game. Compared to like fighting greenskins, for instance, where you've got a unit of goblins that could equal up to 60, 70, 80, 90 goblins, 16 ogres. You just see them ploughing through, bodies flying in different directions. So you've got all these different kind of start points that you can go with. The Immortal Empires map at this point is gigantic. It would take you a huge amount of time to just grind your way across the whole map, just conquering every single section of it, fighting so many different battles as you're going along, probably dealing with the odd rebellion popping up in different areas and having to quash that. But as far as the content is concerned from that perspective, it's huge, it's vast, there's just so much to pick and choose from. as you go through. And you know, if you can play as several different types of undead. You've got lots of different kind of chaos monsters, a few human factions in there. If that's your bag, you've got a couple of chaos, so you've got a couple of dwarf factions in there now. You've got greenskins and ogres. That encompasses all things from like giants and trolls and stuff like that, and you know, goblins and the such. You've got elves of various varieties, evil elves, snooty elves, you know, woodborne elves. You know, you've got lizard people, and yeah, it's all kinds of different levels of fun. So it's that married with the fact that the unit variety is just so different as well. You know, thanks to Warhammer's setting, obviously having all of these different, like, you know, fantastical creatures and different characters that you can draw from. There's like all these unique spells and abilities, and visually the games look great. They run relatively well across a decent amount of variation of hardware. Obviously, as you go through the games, so the third game is going to be a little bit more demanding in places than, say, the first and second game, but having like the whole set of options, including all the different chaos factions and stuff, the third game is where you want to go if you want to basically have the option to play the complete. I guess you could always say it's like you know, the OVE of the whole thing. You've got the entire series available to you, and if you do have all the games, obviously there's sort of micro campaigns you can play. You can just play the original games campaigns. If you have all of them installed, you can play the first game and just play with the much smaller original old world map, and then you can load up the second game and you can play the Eye of the Vortex campaign, which is all set in the new world with Lustria and the High Elves territories, and you know, Skaven and stuff running around, Dark Elves running around there. And then you've got obviously the third game where you've got the kind of the Chaos Wastes, bringing Grand Cathay and Kislev and all that. And so they've all got their own little smaller, you know, more, I guess, more personal campaigns that you can play that have a bit more focus on each of the factions' kind of style, rather than it being just like the big chaotic melee that is the Immortal Empires. But yeah, I think for a vast number of people, the idea of just being able to have this vast map and multiple factions to play with lots of different start points, and at the time of me recording this, there's no doubt more to come. Probably another faction at least to be added, I'd imagine, at some point, alongside more faction DLCs, in the sense of like adding more units or expanding existing factions that have more start points, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's no shortage there, I imagine, of future content coming for Total War Warhammer. It's just been one of those series. And I'll admit that it's one of those ones that it's one where I've only finished a handful of campaigns in the third game, because they do take a long time to play. But it's a fun game where sometimes if you just feel like playing something where you just want to have some cool visual battles and being able to just sort of play for an hour or two for a week every day, and just make a little bit of progress, conquer a few cities, you know, build a little empire thing. It's really good for that. It's, you know, it can just while away the hours, and obviously the battles look great. You can, once you get your units sorted with all the like orders and stuff, and they start fighting, you can zoom that camera right down. You can see all the little combat animations and stuff. I think the only drawback for me about it was that they never really, even by the third game, they never decided to go full on with animation sets for sync kills. Obviously, people who are listening to this or watching this who've played previous Total War games will know that, yeah, it was one of the cool things being able to see like the little, you know, kill animations that would happen. There was like spearman, like, just dodges an attack and gets a swordsman and, you know, like runs him through, kind of hits him with a shield and knocks him down. Those kind of things. And some sync kills are in the game, but usually they're sort of limited to a monstrous creature that will pick up a smaller enemy and like toss it in the air and throw it away, or they'll stomp on somebody, or sometimes a normal... It'll usually be like with two human-sized characters, so you won't ever see a dwarf like headbutt an orc to death, or like a goblin jumping on the back of an elf and stabbing him. Or anything like that. You're not going to see that kind of sync kill animation, which I was really sad about. I thought by the third game they would have done something like that. But that aside, just the moment-to-moment like battle gameplay is kind of fun. It's like watching a cavalry charge and seeing characters flying off and like mad scattered waves across the field is always a good laugh. And you know, just basically the other thing is being able to punk out the AI, because the AI is always just fun to mess with in Total War games. So when you rock up with your first artillery units and you've got them just firing away against an army that doesn't have any artillery, so the AI just runs at you, and you've got your skirmish line ready with all their bows, and they just whittle units down way before they ever get to you. There's just something satisfying about just tearing through an enemy AI force like that and just sweeping the map. I know some people will probably sit there and go like, I just need a bit more of a challenge, but I don't know, I'm more of a person. I just enjoy playing the game where, you can just kind of steamroll a few things. It's just, it's what you play games for. It's just to have fun rather than like stressing yourself out sometimes. I'm not saying that challenging yourself is a bad thing by any stretch, and a lot of people do enjoy, playing games where they really, really have to struggle to get through, because yes, there's the release of you did it and you proved yourself, that you were better than the challenge set by the developers. But yeah, I'm definitely more in the kind of feel that if I can just kind of tinker with stuff and make it just so I can have this superior force kind of thing, I'll do that. I'm a bit more of a turtle or an RTS game, to give you an idea, a bit more of a defensive play than offensive play. So yeah, but I always enjoy that kind of thing about the Total War series, capturing cities, expanding territory in the Empire and stuff, and it is really fun to be able to pick and choose your targets as you go along, and sort of making sure it's like, well, in case you get attacked by an AI, make sure that place is ready to hold off an offensive. But there are those moments, even on like lower difficulties, where you can get caught out and the AI does attack you, and there's like a couple of full stack armies turn up, and you're suddenly having to frantically gather troops and throw stuff in just to whittle them down or to slow, or even sometimes sacrificing a couple of settlements to allow you to get into a position to actually counterattack them, wipe out their big army, and then hopefully have enough left over to, punish them by taking some of their territory off them. So there's little, your little narratives and the stories can come about from it and stuff. So I've really enjoyed the series for that. All of Total War games, but Warhammer Total War specifically, it's been one of those games now that has consistently delivered with just some really entertaining gameplay, really interesting factions to play as. I mean, them taking the time to bring these factions to life in a digital format. The miniatures look great and everything, but actually having like your vampire count's army and seeing like ghouls, scrambling across the field, and zombies, shuffling forward, and the skeleton warriors, and all that kind of stuff. That's really cool, and that's always been, I think, been one of the big sort of fantasies for a lot of PC players, of always wishing for that ability to have these cool games. And yeah, Total War always seemed like the sort of no-brainer one to put together. So who knows? Maybe one day we'll somehow have like a 40k equivalent for people who really enjoy the 40k setting, and who knows? Maybe there'll be an Age of Sigmar one in the future. That will probably get some eyes on, and some people looking at it. But yeah, that was just a little bit of a ramble, bit of a why I like the Warhammer Total War series. I guess kind of an overall just why I like Total War in general. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about Warhammer Total War in that one. But yeah, as always, I mean, what's your opinions on the Total War franchise at the moment? So obviously, Creative Assembly's been coming under a bit of flack, and are you on the side now that Creative Assembly have kind of lost their way? Is it just a case that maybe some people are just making mountains out of molehills? What kind of what side of the fence are you on, essentially? Or are you trying to precariously balance out like a cat when you see one walking along and they've got one leg on the top and the other one half, so they kind of like hobble along? I'm just rambling now. Anyway, have a good one, everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.